So good. We didn't talk about Brexit, did we? No comments. Oh, it's a minefield. Hey, it's good. It's great. So we're going to open up the Bible. I don't know, we've got a few Bibles down here. Maybe you've got it on your phone or your iPad. You want to turn to Matthew 18. That's where we're going to be hanging out a little bit this morning. My background is design, so I love a good, I just like good design. I know that that's subjective, but I came across this particular piece of architecture that I really loved, and it's a back to front, upside down house. I think the Australians get it right. Often Aussie houses, the living space is on the top floor. They make the most of their sort of views, if you like, and I just loved it. I just thought living upside down and back to front, this architect's got it right, because we're called to live upside down and back to front. We follow a king, King Jesus, that his kingdom is back to front, and it's a bit upside down. It's not like the world. And just because we have done architecture in a particular way for a very long time in the UK, we shouldn't just necessarily stick with that. Let's mess with it a bit. And actually, it's a message to us this morning. Just because we've done life in a particular way, I believe the Lord wants to say to us, it's time to do things upside down and back to front, because that's the way he does it. And we're going to be looking at Matthew 18, which is an amazing chapter of Jesus' teaching, and really talking about having a back to front and upside down lifestyle. So before we read the passage, I just want to say welcome to the Cafe Church guys. Let's give them a wave. They've just come online as well. I love that. Some of you are just like that. Hello. That's my best view right there. Do you reckon if I put like eyes on there, we could get away with it? Let's turn around and say, hey, family, Cafe Church, we love you. Brilliant. Welcome, welcome. Matthew 18 is a chapter all about living differently. And it starts with a question. And the question is this: who is the greatest? This is a question that the disciples come and they ask Jesus, who is the greatest? Now, a couple of weeks ago, Victoria, my wife Tori, she's not here today, she's leading worship up in West, and having fun up there. But Tor, I love Tor. Obviously, she's my wife. I think she's brilliant. But sometimes she does things that totally speak my love language. Woo. I picked up Stan, my brother-in-law. He just got off a rig. It was Saturday morning. He'd been offshore for 3 weeks. Picked him up, took him back to our house. And as we walked in, full cooked breakfast. I mean, come on, lads. That's not gender specific. That's just I know lots of girls that like a good egg butty. But there we go, cooked breakfast. And we were like, yes. So here we are, noshing into bacon and eggs and all the rest of it. And then she kind of came in and she said, hey, I'm just so delighted. I've got two of my favorite men in the room. And then she handed us these things. I was like, what's this? And I looked down, and it was tickets to Sports Personality of the Year. Now, you lot know me. Some of you know me pretty well. Anything sporty, that's my language. And I'm like, yes. And so we went to see Sports Personality of the Year, up at the new center. And you know what they're celebrating? They're celebrating the very question: who's the greatest? Who's achieved the most this year in terms of sports? And lots of people have different opinions about that. But I kind of went away going, is that how we weigh greatness? Just purely by achievement? Is it? You see, these guys are asking a question. Who's the greatest? But they're asking the wrong question. What constitutes greatness? What constitutes greatness in God's kingdom? At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? It's a loaded question. It's a loaded question for them. And actually, we ask this question as well. That's what I love about the disciples. They often ask questions that we're asking, but we might not be really saying it out loud, but we're asking it anyway. When we look around the room, we often ask this question. When we're around meetings, we ask this question. Actually, who's the greatest? The boys are asking that question. And the context is this. If you read the passages before this, there's a whole catalogue of stuff that's being going on. And it seems like at least one of the boys in the 12 has got more than a nose in front of everybody else. Yeah? Or maybe 3 of them are maybe pulling away from the other 12. And so there's been some chat. There's been some chat as they've walked around Galilee and seen Jesus minister. They are beginning to chat. You know, if you go back one little paragraph, Jesus and Peter are there, and there's some questions happen. And the long and the short is that Jesus pays Peter's tax. That's all right, isn't it? He says to Peter, Peter, go and throw your line out into the lake. Get a fish. When you open it up, there's going to be two coins. You give one to the taxman and the other one to the taxman. And that's your taxes paid as well. Crumbs, that's favoritism, isn't it? We'll talk about being at the right place at the right time. So this morning after I preach, we're going to have ministry. Tax rebates. We're all like, yes! I mean, the guys must have been going, oh, what's that about? And then if you go back just a little bit more, you know, Jesus has invited 3 of the guys to go up a mountain. They've snuck off, and something's happened on the mountain, but none of the other guys know about it because they've been told to keep it secret. But actually, we know because we get a chance to look back on all of that. And actually, 3 of them have seen Jesus have a moment where he's not just a man. The glory of God now is coming out of him, and it's like, whoa, they get a chance to see that. The other guys don't. And so they come down the mountain. This never happens in church when you've got 3 of people in the know. We're in the know. You ever got a secret? You know some stuff. You can't help it, can you? You're like, we know, but you don't. You know, it's like presents. You know, when you've got something for Christmas, you're like, oh, you know, you've got a great present for somebody. You know, they don't. This never happens in church, does it? And suddenly the 3 of them are like, yeah, we know some stuff. You don't. There's some chat going on here. And then if you back it up again, Peter is there again, and Jesus is asking questions, and Jesus says, Peter, who do people say I am? And the SWAT in the group gets it right again. Peter's like, no. They've said a whole bunch of stuff, but you're the Messiah, you're the one. And all the other guys are like, I was going to say that. And then let's back up even further. Jesus told the guys to get in the boat and go across the lake. And they're working, they're crossing the lake and they're rowing against the wind. They've been at it for hours. And suddenly Jesus comes walking on the water. Who is it that responds? Not him again. He's ahead of us again. Peter's out the boat walking on the water. You lot didn't do this. You know what I mean? Who is the greatest? There's been a bit of chat going on. There's a bit of, jostling for position. Where's my place going to be in your kingdom? That's what's really behind this question, isn't it? Is there a place for me? Is there a position for me? You see, the boys want security. And actually, often this question unearths some stuff for you and me. It brings about, it's coming from a place of insecurity. It's coming from a place of, I want to know I've got a place. But we never ask that really, do we? And so, Jesus responds then, doesn't he, to this question. Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus? When they should have been asking not who, but what constitutes greatness in your kingdom. We want to understand that. Stop looking at one another. And so Lord, Jesus answers this question. Just go on a little bit further. It says what? It says, and so he called to them a little child and placed the child amongst them. They've posed a question, and now he brings a child in front and says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Wow, they're asking who's the greatest, and Jesus is actually, in his response, is talking about gateway language. It's not even about how great you are, but you need to get in first. You will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the humble position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. There are three responses to this question, and this amazing moment where Jesus is going to answer the question by bringing a child and having a child stand in front of them. There are three responses to this child. And the first one is we must. We must become like. There is an imperative command here. You want to know what is great and how to be great, then you must become like. You must be willing to change. You must enter into my kingdom by becoming humble like this little child. The answer is a child. Why does he bring a child? You know, they're all crowding around Jesus, asking this question. And then he says, look, hold on, we're going to answer the question. And he brings a child. He's kind of like, the guys have to move out of the way, and the child is now standing before them. Why a child? Because a child in this context, in this time, a child really had no place. You want a place, you've got to get to a place where the place isn't important in your life. The position isn't important in your life anymore. It's not about how many letters and numbers you have next to your name, or whether you've got a name tag or a desk at work. Some of us we're nobody unless we have a desk. Hot desk in, who am I? It's true, isn't it? And Jesus is saying, I want you to become like a child. And a child in this moment has no real authority. It doesn't really have a place and a position in society. Wow, that is a challenge to these guys, isn't it? I want you must become humble like this little child. Not only to be great, but to even enter into the benefits of my kingdom. We want more. We're singing, we want more of you, Lord. We want more. Then we must become like children. We must become humble. That is what Jesus is saying to us today. We want more of him, then we need to, go low. We want the greatness of God, then we have to go the other way. We need to come low. And so this child now is embodying a life of active humility. And we could say a bunch of things about the characteristics of children. But in this instance, the posture of this moment is Jesus is placing humility as the central characteristic of the deepest and most paramount importance. It's the key fob to getting access to all the other stuff. God's goodness and greatness. And so let's be honest. When you think you've got it, you've lost it. When you think you've got it, humility, you've probably lost it. That's just the way it works. Have you ever been in a party or a social situation and somebody really attractive, and I know that's very subjective, walks into the room? Yeah? And it's like, wow, Of course, that happens when my wife walks into the room. But somebody really attractive walks into the room. Now, here's the thing. If they know that they're attractive, they instantly become less attractive. Wouldn't you agree? You're like, oh, they're attractive, but suddenly they don't. But if they walk into the room and they haven't a Scooby-Doo that they are absolutely gorgeous or a total hunk, or however you want to put it, the moment, you see, we recognize that. We're like, they don't even know how good looking they are. And then suddenly they become even more attractive. You see, that's how humility works. The moment you think you've got it, you've lost it. And when you don't think you've got it, you probably have it. Does that make sense? Some of you are giggling. So you're like, oh, next time I come in the room, I've got to pretend to be like, how do you do that? I'm not very attractive. I've got this book. I forgot to bring it with me. It's 70 Great Christians. Some of you might have read it or seen it. But it just spans the whole of sort of Christian history of amazing people who we would call great. Nearly all of them didn't feel very great. Nearly all of them actually felt, in many ways, failures. We think they're great. And I know that God probably thinks they're amazing. But they actually felt not that great. Because they were defined by the great commission that God had given them to do. It was so beyond them. They were pursuing something that was so far beyond them that they never completed on it. People like Hudson Taylor, who are just extraordinary missionaries, men and family that went to China to bring the gospel. This is what it said about Hudson Taylor. He was speaking at a conference, I think back here in the UK, and he was being introduced. It was a large sort of conference setting, and the person introducing him was saying things like, we've got such an amazing man of God come to speak to us today, illustrious chap, done and achieved an amazing amount. And then Hudson Taylor stands up to address everybody, and he says this: "Dear friends, I am the little servant of an illustrious master." He just knew who he was in God. Someone asked George Muller, I know he's a number of people in this room, their hero, who started orphanages in an unbelievable faith in Bristol. And somebody said to him, "What's the secret of the success, and what's the secret of your ministry and life and power, and God seems to answer your prayers," and all the rest of it? And George Muller's response was this: "There was a day when I died." Utterly died. I died to George Muller, his opinions, preferences, and tastes, and will. I died to the world, its approval or censure. I died to the approval or blame of even my friends. And I've spent my life giving my life to God. You see, most of these guys, the amazing, great Christians, found themselves on what I call the thin line, that place of utter reliance on Him, on God. A child is utterly reliant on their parent. So these things are coming together in this embodying illustration of what it means to be humble. To not worry about position and place, but to be also utterly dependent on Him. But we want more, Lord. We're singing, we want more. Do you understand where we're going here today? If we want more, then this is what Lord is saying to us and encouraging us. And we see this principle right the way through the Bible, the great sort of God story of how He uses His people. Let's just think about those people in the Bible we think are great. I mean, let's be honest. Peter, James, and John, and the rest of the disciples, when they think of great men and women of God, let me tell you, they would have gone back to people like Moses, one of the greatest. So here's the thing. To lead the people of God, to lead them out of Egypt, God had to lead Moses out of Egypt and then get Egypt out of Moses. Can you imagine? Let's just remember who Moses is. Moses is the prince of Egypt. In that time, Egypt was the center of knowledge universally. Everything, it was, let's be honest, even today we don't even quite understand how the pyramids were made. We've got all sorts of conjecture and engineers are trying to work it all out. But the reality is, here is Moses, a prince of Egypt with unbelievable knowledge and power and self kind of, confidence. But to lead the Israelites out, God had to get Egypt out of him. And so what does he do? He leads them into the desert for 40 years to go from prince of Egypt, one word things happen, to now serving another man and actually hanging out with another man's sheep. Smelly shepherd. From prince of Egypt to smelly shepherd. 40 years. Why? Because he wants him to become humble so that he can become great. Or should I say, he wants him to become humble so God can do great through him. You see, God is committed, isn't he? He is committed. If it's not in our character now, he's going to forge it in us. And we could go all the way through the Bible, through most of the great stories. Joseph, arrogant teenager called of God, but he needed the pride dealt with. And so he ends up in slavery and prison. There is a lowering before a rising. You see, even Peter himself, he doesn't realize this, but his passion, I'll go wherever you go. I'll even die with you. You see, it's passion, but there's an arrogance around that. He doesn't even realize what he's saying until another child meets him at a fireplace and unearths the pride in Peter's life. Painful, isn't it? And so now, and he doesn't even know it yet, but there is a lowering for Peter before God can use him in greatness. And so humility is the preferred material that God builds with. A couple of months ago, we were in 2 Corinthians, weren't we? And there's that beautiful passage that says, we have this all-surpassing power, or all-surpassing greatness in earthen vessels. The etymology of humility is that word humus, not the one you eat. Humus is soil. It's clay. We need to become clay for the greatness of God to fill us and for his hand to be upon us. You see that? So what is soil? What is clay? It's decaying matter. Willingly change means I am going to deny some stuff in my life. I want to die to myself, to my want of position and power. And as we apply that to our lives, guess what? We're becoming humus. We're becoming soil. We're becoming clay that his great surpassing power can fill. It's great, isn't it? God wants to encourage us today. Let's be like little children. So who does God's greatness rest on? The humble. It is the soil of God's garden, where all his gifting, all of his talents can be sown into. And that, when you've got really good soil, then those seeds take root quickly, don't they? And the roots go down and the seed bursts out and becomes something. Great soil, great material. We start with humility. That's what Jesus is really getting at here. And so we need to be willing to change. We want more. So let's be willing to change. And then here it says, welcome. Let's welcome these children, this child. welcome humility. What I love about, I don't know how you guys read the Bible, but I love stepping into the moment. So like I'm asking those questions just as much as the disciples are asking the questions, yeah? You know, looking around, who's going to be the greatest, you know? Oh. And then Jesus says, hey, just can you move out of the way and let's bring this child and let this child stand where you've been asking actually the wrong question. And so a child is now standing where the question is being asked. This child is now center stage. Where the blokes have been jostling for position, the child has that position, the very space where the question was posed. It's obedient, innocent child that's not saying anything. But just by being present is actually screaming out something that's actually shaming the very question that these men are asking. Does that make sense? It's really powerful. Listen, we want to be a church and a community that makes room. That makes room, and not only makes room, and not only welcomes humility, but actually champions it amongst us as a community. Because if we're welcoming humility, it says clearly there, we're welcoming Jesus. And what have we been singing? I want more of you. If we want more of you, Lord, then we need to have more of humility. We want to embrace humility. And then when we're embracing humility and champion humility amongst us here, then it seems like a greater proportion of God's presence and power will be with us as a people. So we need to champion that. We need to encourage it. When we see it in one another, we need to be like, yeah, that's the thing. Oh, I love it how you do that. I saw how you took the chairs out. I saw how you went and visited. Nobody else knows. I saw it, but God sees it. Yeah? And so, as you know, in our culture here, the question you might be asking is, I want to be a leader. I want to be great, or whatever, however you want to word it, whatever the questions are. The deal is this: let's become like children and let's serve and be humble. Let's welcome that into our midst and champion it amongst us. Humility recognizes our inadequacy, but his sufficiency. The humble recognize that we just can't do this on our own. But with him, everything changes. Whoever welcomes this child welcomes me. So let's welcome and embrace this characteristic of humility amongst us. Let's put it center stage. Not just on a church on a Sunday, but in our hearts. I've been practicing something recently where when I'm worshiping or praying on my own, I'm trying to take thoughts of pride and pull them under the rule of Jesus. When we often talk about we're the kingdom of God, we want the power of the kingdom to be amongst us. Then actually, what are we actually asking? We're saying, I want to be under the rule of God. I want to be under the rule and the reign of Jesus. I want to take my prideful thoughts and pull them under the rule of Jesus. When I think I can fix it on my own and do so, I want to pull my lifestyle and attitude under Jesus. Why? Because I want more of him. I need to choose. I need to engage my will. I want to bring those things under his rule and reign. And then, you know what? There's a final thing here. I know we've kind of been much more kind of on those two, that first point, and then this point about humility becoming central for us as a character trait, But then there's this final W in this passage. And if we read on just really quickly, and we're not going to hang out on this a lot, but Jesus often does like the major encouragement stuff, and then he throws in a woe. Because it says there, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it'd be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck. and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. You know, we want to willingly change, don't we? We recognize that the gateway to the kingdom of God and to all the benefits of his kingdom is, you know, in the greatness. We want the greatness of God to be upon us as a people and in us as people and working through us as people. Then we need to be submissive and saying, Lord, to you, I want to come down. I want to be humble like you. The greatest example is Jesus washing people's feet. Philippians says he did not, see himself as equal to God, but came not only as a servant, but a servant who was crucified, who gave himself a criminal's death. We've got the perfect example in Jesus. And so then we want to welcome that model right into the very center of who we are, by applying that rule to all of our thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes, and as a community. And then, into that, there is a little bit of a woe. The word used here, when you welcome me, this child, you're welcoming me. And so we need to be very careful about how we love and care, especially for those who have just begun the journey of faith. He's staying on the children's language because he's saying, I don't want anyone to cause these little children, these new believers, to stumble. And so if we're acting with real humility and putting God center, and we're dealing with some stuff in our own lives, we won't take advantage of anyone else. We won't mistreat others. Our heart to those who in particular are taking the first steps of Christianity and following Jesus is that I will not put my disappointments on these new believers. But I am going to encourage them because we're welcoming the humble and the lowly and the starters. And so there is an emphasis here about new baby Christians. But actually the language used also is kind of like a double thing. And it's also saying, but we welcome those of lowly place and position in society. He's saying the poor, those that do not have a voice, those that are vulnerable. You know, the church must be the one place in this world where the vulnerable come and they meet with Jesus and they're took care of. And the reality is our history is not good. Universally, the church has not always done this well. And we all know stories. But every generation reads this. Every generation has the opportunity to embrace it and say that the church is going to be a place and a community where the vulnerable could come, be loved and taken care of, and meet Jesus. And they're going to be encouraged. And so we want to be that, don't we? We want humility to be right at the core. Who is the greatest? That was the question. Well, the greatest are those that lower themselves, humble themselves as a child. Let's not worry about position and place and all of that. That's for Jesus to give out. We want God's power to rest on us. Then let's be soil. Let's be humus in his hands. Are we good? Why don't we stand?